For my post-1877 movie, I chose to watch The Untouchables, which was based off of the Prohibition era in the early 1930s, which would make this movie placed in period 7 of the 9 periods. The movie started off with an introduction of Al Capone, who was a major crime lord who ruled the city of Chicago, and he ruled the city of Chicago by selling illegal alcohol. Eliot Ness was introduced as the Prohibition agent for the Treasury Department, who was assigned with stopping Al Capone. In the beginning of the movie, Eliot Ness made numerous attempts at trying to stop Al Capone, but ultimately failed because people who were supposed to be on his team were not actually helping him. They were helping Al Capone. And after Eliot Ness realized this, he wanted to give up, but with the help of Officer Malone, he formed a group called the Untouchables that he could trust and that he thought were willing to do whatever it took to take Al Capone down. The group consisted of Eliot Ness, Officer Malone, George Stone, and Oscar Wallace. The group went on to successfully stop Al Capone and stop some of his shipments from Canada. They got enough evidence to get him convicted of tax evasion. And when Al Capone was realizing that his time was coming, he decided to try and kill the Untouchables and successfully killed 2 of them. And he also tried to bribe Eliot Ness to stop, and Eliot Ness did not take the bribe. In the end of the movie, Eliot Ness ended up taking down Al Capone by getting him convicted of tax evasion and sentencing him to 11 years in prison. Historical accuracy. I would say this movie is like somewhat historically accurate because it was like the main idea, the Prohibition era, Al Capone and Eliot Ness, those were like real people, and like that actually did happen. But like a major scene that happened at the Canadian border where they like raided the Canadian border to stop one of Al Capone's shipments of alcohol, it was like this really big scene that never actually happened. And Eliot Ness had killed one of Al Capone's right-hand men at the end of the movie for killing Officer Malone, and that never actually happened. And I think the other thing was that Eliot Ness was not actually involved in Al Capone's final conviction. What I learned, I didn't know anything about Al Capone before I watched this movie, and I didn't know like how bad people were disobeying the Prohibition law, especially in major cities. So I got to learn that from the movie. And one of the questions I had was when Eliot Ness was recruiting like people for the Untouchables, he kept asking if they had like a wife and kids, like a family in general, and if they did, he would not let them like on the team. And that made me wonder, like, were some men not allowed to get certain jobs because they had a family back in those days? And also I was wondering if people disobeying the Prohibition law, was that the same like all around the US or just in major cities? My thoughts on the movie was that it was pretty good, and I would rate it like an 8 out of 10 because it was pretty like interesting to watch, but I would deduct 2 points because some of the action scenes looked a little fake. I forgot to say this, but here are the pictures.